For decades, Robert Redford stood as one of Hollywood's last true legends, a man who could command the screen with just a glance and leave audiences breathless with a single line. From Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to The Sting and All the President's Men, Redford was not just an actor, he was an icon. But behind that magnetic smile and calm voice, there was a secret, a burden that would haunt him for years, quietly eating away at the man the world thought had everything. When news broke that Redford had passed away, fans were left heartbroken. But what truly shocked everyone was what came next. His wife, Sybil Sagars, made a quiet, devastating revelation about the secret Robert had carried to his final days. A truth so personal, so painful, that it recast the story of his life in an entirely new light. Those who knew him best say Redford spent his final years in quiet reflection, surrounded by nature, his paintings, and memories of a life filled with both triumph and tragedy. But what his wife revealed after his death has made even his most devoted fans see him differently, as a man shaped as much by pain as by genius. This is the untold story of Robert Redford, the Hollywood icon who lived with a hidden sorrow, and the haunting truth his wife could no longer key Robert Redford's life seemed like the definition of the American dream. Born in Santa Monica in 1936, he rose from modest beginnings to become one of Hollywood's most celebrated leading men. His golden hair, piercing eyes, and quiet intensity made him a favorite of directors and audiences alike. By the 1970s, he wasn't just a movie star, he was the movie star. His films made millions, his image graced every magazine cover, and his influence extended far beyond Hollywood. But what few realized was that beneath that calm exterior, Redford carried a weight that fame could never erase. In interviews, Redford often spoke of his discomfort with celebrity. He avoided the spotlight whenever he could, preferring the solitude of his ranch in Utah to the chaos of Los Angeles. "I've never been comfortable being looked at," he once said, a surprising confession from a man whose face was recognized around the world. Behind that discomfort was a deep and lasting pain, one that shaped nearly every decision he made in his life. That pain began early. When Robert was just 22 years old, he and his first wife, Lola Van Wagenen, experienced an unthinkable tragedy. Their first child, Scott, died suddenly in infancy, a loss that shattered Redford and would haunt him for the rest of his life. In later years, he admitted that he never fully recovered from it. "You don't ever get over something like that," he once told a close friend. "You just learn to live with it." That heartbreak quietly followed him. Even as his career skyrocketed, on screen, he played characters who seemed untouchable, clever con men, fearless rebels, idealistic journalists. But off-screen, Redford was often withdrawn, introspective, and restless. Fame had brought him everything he'd ever dreamed of, yet he felt strangely disconnected from it all. He sought refuge in directing, producing, and eventually founding the Sundance Institute, not to chase more fame, but to find meaning beyond it. Still, even as he built a new legacy, the grief he carried never left him. His second marriage to Sybil Sagars seemed to bring him peace. The German-born artist shared his love for nature and art, and together they spent their later years in quiet harmony. But those close to the couple said Redford's health began to decline more rapidly than many realized. He was battling several illnesses, including a rare skin condition and complications related to aging, yet he kept most of it hidden from the public. He didn't want pity or attention. He wanted dignity. As Redford's days grew quieter, Sybil noticed that his thoughts often returned to his past, not the fame, not the awards, but the family he had lost. He would talk about his son Scott with tears in his eyes, even decades later. Friends say he carried guilt, wondering if he could have done something differently, if his relentless drive for success had somehow cost him more than he realized. When he passed away peacefully surrounded by loved ones, the world mourned the loss of a cinematic legend, but what came after stunned everyone. When his wife revealed the deeply personal secret that Robert had guarded for so long, a truth that explained the sorrow behind his smile and the distance he often kept from Hollywood's glittering world. That revelation would forever change how fans remembered the man behind the legend to herself. After Robert Redford's death, fans expected tributes about his extraordinary career, the Oscar wins, his legacy as the founder of Sundance, and his reputation as one of the last true gentlemen of Hollywood. But when his wife, Sybil Sagars, chose to speak publicly, her words weren't about fame or fortune. They were about pain, regret, and the heavy truth Redford had quietly carried for decades. In a heartfelt statement, Sybil revealed that Redford had spent much of his life haunted by guilt over his family, not just the tragic death of his first son, Scott, but the emotional distance he often felt from his surviving children. "He loved them deeply," she said softly, "but he always felt like he didn't give enough of himself." His work, his perfectionism, it took so much from him. He blamed himself for not being more present. To the public, Robert Redford seemed like the embodiment of grace and control, but at home, he was a man struggling with his own emotions. He had grown up in a household where feelings were rarely expressed. Something he once said made it hard for him to open up later in life. "I didn't know how to talk about pain," he confessed in an old interview, "so I buried it in my work." That silence, Sybil explained, became his biggest burden. Even as Redford achieved enormous success, directing Ordinary People, which won him an Academy Award, and building Sundance into a global platform for independent filmmakers. He never stopped battling the quiet sorrow within him. Friends said he would often retreat to his ranch in Utah, painting for hours or simply sitting outside watching the changing light. He didn't want to be remembered as a star, one close friend said. He wanted peace. But peace was hard for him to find. Sybil's revelation didn't end there. She shared that in his final months, Redford had written a series of personal letters to each of his children, a form of emotional confession he'd never been able to express in person. In those letters, he spoke about his regrets, his love, and his desire for them to live fully without the shadows that had followed him. He wanted them to forgive him, Sybil said quietly, not for what he did, but for what he couldn't do, for the time he lost and the words he never said. The letters were deeply moving, revealing a man who understood too late that success could never replace connection. It was this truth, Sybil explained, that broke him the most. Not illness, not aging, but the realization that even the brightest careers come with painful costs. In one letter, Redford reportedly wrote, "I spent my life chasing stories on screen because I was afraid to face my own." Those words stunned his family and friends, who had always admired his creative brilliance, but never realized how much it was driven by grief and self-doubt. When Sybil shared this part of Robert's story, fans around the world were shaken. The golden boy of Hollywood, who seemed to have it all, looks, talent, success, and love, had been quietly suffering under the weight of loss and regret. His story became a reminder that even the strongest, most admired people carry wounds the world never sees. For Sybil, revealing the truth was an act of love, her way of honoring the man behind the myth. He didn't want pity, she said. He wanted understanding. But as the world learned more about the secret Robert Redford kept buried, one question lingered: what exactly pushed him to hide it for so long? And what final revelation did he leave behind before he took his last breath? As the world began to process the truth revealed by Robert Redford's wife, another layer of his secret started to unfold, one that connected his personal pain with the choices that defined his career. Behind his charm and calm exterior was a man constantly seeking redemption through his art. Each movie he made, each character he played, carried echoes of the guilt and grief he tried to silence. Friends and colleagues later recalled how Robert often gravitated toward roles that reflected his own internal battles. Men burdened by secrets, haunted by the past, or struggling to find meaning in a world of chaos. Whether it was Jay Gatsby's longing in The Great Gatsby or the stoic idealism of Bob Woodward in All the President's Men, these characters weren't just fictional to him. They were mirrors of the man he was, searching for truth, yet running from it at the same time. During the height of his fame, Redford would often turn down blockbuster offers that could have made him even richer. Instead, he chose projects with emotional depth and moral complexity. He once said, "I was never interested in playing the hero. I wanted to play the man behind the hero, the one with doubts." Those doubts were real, shaped by the pain of losing his child and the constant pressure of living up to the world's expectations. When he founded the Sundance Institute in 1981, many thought it was just a creative venture, a way for him to give back to independent filmmakers. But those close to him understood it differently. It was his escape, his therapy. Sundance was where Robert could nurture authenticity, something he felt Hollywood had stripped away, and something he feared he had lost within himself. He poured his soul into it, spending more time there than on film sets during his later years. Still, despite his success in building a creative legacy, Redford's health began to decline quietly. He kept his ailments private, even from close friends, fearing that sympathy would overshadow the dignity he'd spent a lifetime preserving. As he grew weaker, he reportedly told Sabine, "I don't want people to remember me as a sick man. I want them to remember me as someone who cared." That wish reflected the man he truly was, private, proud, and deeply human. In his final days, Redford spent most of his time surrounded by nature. He would sit for hours on the porch of his ranch, watching the sunset over the Utah mountains. Sabine said those moments were when he seemed most at peace. He would smile softly and say, "This is what I was looking for all along." It was as if he had finally found the serenity that fame and fortune could never give him. But the emotional turning point came when Sabine decided to read aloud the last letter he had written, one that wasn't addressed to his children or the public but to her. In it, Robert confessed the secret he had carried longer than any other. He had lived much of his life pretending to be strong, when in truth he had been broken for decades. "I wore strength like a mask," he wrote. But behind it was fear. Fear of losing everything and fear of being forgotten. Those words struck a chord with Sabine and everyone who later learned of them. The man the world saw as unshakable had spent his life quietly wrestling with vulnerability. And perhaps that's why his performances felt so real. They came from a place of genuine emotion. By the time Robert Redford took his final breath, he had made peace with his past. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled him. Sybil described his passing as calm, almost serene, as if he was finally free. In the days following Robert Redford's passing, Hollywood mourned deeply. Tributes poured in from actors, directors, and fans who had been touched by his brilliance. Yet, behind the public mourning, his family was quietly carrying out his final wishes, instructions he had left behind that revealed the kind of man he truly was. Robert Redford didn't want a grand Hollywood farewell or a spotlighted ceremony. Instead, he had requested a small, private gathering at his Utah ranch, surrounded only by his closest loved ones, friends, and the natural beauty he had cherished more than fame itself. At that intimate ceremony, his wife, Sabine Zagars, read from his final note, a message not about movies, awards, or legacy, but about life's quiet truths. "I've learned," Redford had written, "that success means nothing if you can't share it with the people you love. I chased the world, but in the end, I found peace only when I stopped running." His words moved everyone to tears, a reminder that even the most celebrated lives are made of simple human struggles and deep emotions. In his will, Robert Redford had made sure that his $200 million fortune, though vast, would not define his memory. Much of it was directed toward environmental conservation, Native American arts programs, and the continuation of the Sundance Institute. His children were provided for generously, but what touched them most was not the money. It was the handwritten letters and the emotional honesty he had finally found in his last years. For a man who had once struggled to say how he felt, those final words were the greatest gift he could give. Sabine later revealed that Robert's final years were both beautiful and heartbreaking. He faced illness bravely but also reflected deeply on the life he had lived. He often spoke of the people he had lost, his parents, his son Scott, and dear friends who had passed away over the years. "He was ready," she said softly in one interview. "He told me that he had nothing left to prove. He just wanted peace." As the years have passed since his death, Robert Redford's legacy has only grown stronger. His films remain timeless, his influence on independent cinema unmatched, and his humanitarian efforts continue to make a difference. But to those who knew him best, his real legacy isn't found in the glamour of Hollywood. It's in his humility, his honesty, and his lifelong quest to understand the meaning of loss and love. Fans continue to visit his Utah ranch, leaving flowers and letters at the gates, thanking him for the stories that shaped their lives. Some say they can still feel his presence there, in the quiet wind that moves through the mountains, in the sunlight that falls across the valleys he loved. For them, Robert Redford wasn't just an actor or a director. He was a storyteller of the human spirit, a man who gave everything to his craft while quietly battling his own pain. In the end, the truth revealed by his wife didn't tarnish his image. It humanized him. It showed the world that even legends have scars, and that true strength often comes from learning to live with them. Robert Redford's final message to the world, through his letters and his life, was simple yet profound. Fame fades, but love and honesty endure, and as his wife said tearfully at his memorial, he didn't die with regret. He died finally at peace. He spent his life searching for truth, and in the end, he found it. Robert Redford's story reminds us that behind every great man is a greater struggle, one that makes his triumphs even more meaningful. And though he's gone, his light, like the sunsets he loved so dearly, will never truly fade.